We haven't had a chance to meet yet. My name's Garry. I'm one of the pastors here. Thanks for coming out, making your way out this morning to spend some time with us. We started a series at the beginning of the year called Searching For, and the whole premise of it is we're searching for those things that we find ourselves searching for when we navigate this thing called life. The first week we kicked it off when looking for hope. We search for hope when things seem hopeless, when we're up against it. Last week, we looked at the search that we go on for significance, when in the scheme of things, we sometimes feel like we don't matter. Not just matter to one another, but matter to God. Well, this morning, we're going to look at something that we search for when we are overrun with the angst and worry that can boil over, when the what-ifs and I don't knows of life come creeping in and take center stage in our mind, and it's the search for peace. A few years ago, the worst case scenario survival handbook hit bookstores and instantly became a bestseller. If you don't know anything about this book, it's a book that provides step-by-step, and it's got pictures in it, it's illustrated, instructions on what to do if the unthinkable were to happen. For instance, whether readers found themselves caught in quicksand, near an erupting volcano, sitting in a plane where the pilot happens to pass out, these pocket guides prepared people in case those scenarios were to happen. Whether readers found themselves caught in the quicksand or, trying to leap from a motorcycle to a moving car, like who needs to learn how to do that? Or whether to get wiggle free from an alligator. Don't see too many alligators around here. The demand for these books is interesting, though, because they're somewhat humorous. If you flip through them, you can get them on ebooks and PDFs and stuff like that. They're quite humorous, some of the things they come up with, but they suggest something, and it's that we humans have a tendency to allow our minds to imagine what could go wrong. But hey, if we're honest, that's kind of easy to do, isn't it? How we let those little thoughts get the best of us, and soon that tiny little concern turns into a full-blown worst-case scenario. Here's how it happens. I'll give you an example. A couple of examples. Maybe you're having these recurring headaches. They just keep popping up every day. You're just having these headaches. And so what do? Well, what everyone does, go on Google. Find out what's wrong with what's going on. And just like that, those persistent headaches that you have, brain tumor, it's not looking good. I only have so much time left, okay? Or how about this? You get an email from your boss late on a Friday afternoon saying that they would like to meet with you on Monday morning to discuss some things. So right away you think, oh, they're probably going to double my pay, reduce my hours. No, we don't think that, do we? No, we start conjuring up all kinds of ideas of what they just might want to talk to us about. You try and put it out of your mind, right? You think, I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to worry about it. You get home from work. What's the first thing you do? You flip open the laptop. I got to read that email again. Just maybe I'm missing something. But this time as you're reading it, you can hear your boss's tone of voice all over the words. And it ain't a very good tone. And so you go to bed Friday night thinking about that. By Saturday, you're pretty much convinced yourself that your boss is completely ticked off with you. And that scenario just keeps rolling around in your mind all day Saturday. And by Sunday, man, you're all but fired. Which means now you're worried about finding another job so you can pay your mortgage and your car payment and the heating bill and put food on the table. But then what happens? Monday comes. You meet with your boss. And you find out the thing they wanted to talk to you about was to just let you know how good a job you were doing. Those persistent headaches you had? Well, you finally went to a real doctor And you learn that they're simply caused by a lack of sleep and muscle tension due to worry and stress. Maybe from reading and misinterpreting an email, possibly. You know, in the face of everyday uncertainties, we can habitually create worst-case scenarios in our minds. Because that's exactly how worry works. It takes the smallest shadow of doubt and begins to grow it into a full-grown monster. I love how pastor and author Chuck Swindoll, this is what he said about worry. Listen to this. He said, worries are like mental monsters that crawl into our head, then go to bed with us and steal our sleep. How true is that? But here's the funny thing in all of this. We all know that worrying doesn't solve anything. I mean, personally, I have never met anyone who reflects on their past. You know, you're sitting down talking with them like, hey, what was life like growing up? Well, you know, money sure was tight, but worry pulled me through. Right? Or that diagnosis freaked me right out, so I called all my friends so they could worry with me. Have you ever heard this? Have you ever heard a doctor say to a patient, yeah, it doesn't look good. The only thing we can do at this point is worry. But we do, right? Worrying, like one person said, is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it gets you nowhere. Worrying doesn't get us anywhere, but yet, like we heard in that video, worry we do, and we get caught in this vicious circle. So the question becomes, how can we move to a place to kind of quell the worries, that natural propensity that we have to worry, so we can actually live a life full of joy and happiness and expectation? Well, we could try what this one fellow did. I came across a story about this guy who had it with worrying, so he hired someone to do his worrying for him. And finally, he found a guy that was willing to do it for him, but for $200,000 a year. For $200,000 a year, he'd be his worrier, his hired worrier. And the first question this guy asked his new boss was, how are you going to come up with the $200,000 to pay me to worry for you? And the guy looked at him and says, that's your worry. You know, we laugh, but there is a lot of truth in that. Because you and I do have someone that is willing to take on our worries and not charge you $200,000. That someone is the God who created us. I love these words written by Peter, the rough, tough, gruff fisherman that we talk about a lot around here. He said this. Listen to these words. Give all your worries. And the Greek word for all is all. Everything. All of it. Give all your worries and cares to God. Why? For he cares for you. God asks you to give him your worries. Peter's words, of course, are played out throughout the biblical narrative. Thousands of years before, listen to these words from a prophet. A prophet was just a spokesperson for God. God would come along to them and say, I want you to go tell these people, in this case the Israelites, I want you to share these words with them, okay? And so he comes to Isaiah and he says, here's some words I want you to say to my people, because they're not trusting me very much. They're beginning to doubt my goodness, because from their perspective, their future looks pretty bleak. And so here's what God said to his people, the Israelites, through Isaiah. He said, don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be dismayed, worried, upset, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. And then later we read Joshua, who was tasked by God to lead these same people, these Israelites, into the promised land that he promised them all along. They're standing right across a river from it. He's saying, go take it, it's yours. But the people had heard that the land was infested with these giant people that were just fierce and mean, and they're like, oh, we can't go in there, we can't go in there. So Joshua said to these terrified people, be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go, whatever you face. Jesus himself was talking with his closest followers. It was shortly after he had risen from the grave on that first Easter. And he's about to go back to heaven. And he's leaving them with all these instructions. And he says, be sure of this, be sure of this. I am with you always, even to the end of the age. You know, what Peter, Isaiah, Joshua, and Jesus are trying to desperately convey to us is the key to facing an uncertain future is to know, and not just know, but deeply know, like in here, to know that you are not alone in the what ifs and the I don't knows of life. Because when you worry, that's sure how it feels. God, the God who created you, extravagantly loves you and is with you. But here's the question. Do you believe that? Do you believe that it is possible for you and for me to face an unknown future with strength and courage in a way that we aren't afraid, anxious, or discouraged? Well, I'll throw this, what I think is the answer out to this. It's just something you can think about, toss around. I think that all depends on what we believe to be true about God. And I would even go further to say, and what we believe to be true about God comes down to how well we know him. And how do we get to know him? Simply by spending time with him. It's much like when you meet someone as you make your way through life and you get introduced to somebody and you start to chat and you hang out a little bit. You start to chat a bit more and you begin to learn more about them. They learn a bit more about you. And eventually what happens is that person moves from just a casual acquaintance to a friend, to a good friend, to a great friend, a best friend. And just like getting to know a friend is an ongoing, lifelong journey, getting to know God is much the same way. You know, twice a year here on Sunday mornings, we offer 2 8-week workshops from the Emotional Healthy series. We just finished one. We've got one coming up February 16th, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. We're going to have an info session February 9th, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And although these courses are packed full, they got a ton of practical tools that we can use to enhance and improve our relationships and our spirituality. The main thrust behind these, the thing that threads its way through both of these programs, is the importance of continuously integrating time with God into our everyday life. It's like building this natural rhythm. Instead of relegating our spiritual journey to a Sunday morning, which is often what happens because we live in a society, a culture that is very compartmentalized. You do this here, you do this here, you do this here, but they very rarely mix. And so if you haven't taken that, or even if you have taken it, they say you should go through those courses at least 3 times to let it really sink in. If you haven't taken that course, I would recommend you sign up. There's one week in particular that has impacted me to a degree I never thought possible, and it's when they talk about the Sabbath and how important that is. So just stay tuned for information on that. But all throughout the biblical narrative, you can read stories of people who faced uncertain futures, that were able to face them with joy and peace. And how? Well, if you read their stories, you can see that they intentionally carved off some time to spend with God. And eventually what happened is they learned that they could trust him, no matter what circumstances said or the unknown future said. And one of the greatest examples that I want to share with you this morning is that of David. David and Goliath fame. You may have heard that story. If you read that story of David and Goliath, it's pretty clear that David had spent some time with God. He was a young boy at the time, and here's this behemoth of a man screaming out threats, murderous threats to these people, like, come and take me down. And this little boy, David, believes in God's power so much that he's like, I'll go. All these men back there, knees knocking. He goes out there and takes this guy down. But it's in some words that David penned later on in his life, where he describes beautifully how he was able to find peace in the midst of uncertainty. Listen to these words from the most famous passage found in the Bible, Psalm 23. This morning I'm going to read it from a new translation that I've just recently, a friend said, hey, you should read this in the Passion Translation. So that's what I'm going to share it from. And what the Passion Translation is the translators are seeking to bring to life the essential meaning of God's original message as presented in the original language without kind of losing that poetic beauty in it. And so it was originally written in Hebrew. So they've taken the Hebrew words and they've just translated it into this beautiful English language. And here's how it goes. Listen to this. Psalm 23. The Lord is my best friend and my shepherd. I will always have more than enough. The Lord is my best friend. That's David's starting point. And what he, in essence, he's saying is, God, I have spent so much time with you, hours and hours, reflecting on who you are, that I see you as my friend. And not only that, I can trust you to guide me and lead me like a shepherd wherever it is you want me to go. So I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry about what tomorrow will bring, or having enough or not having enough. And he continues, he says, he, referring to God, offers a resting place for me in his, get this, luxurious love. His tracks take me to an oasis of peace. The quiet brook of bliss. That's where he restores and revives my life. He opens before me pathways to God's pleasure and leads me along in his footsteps of righteousness so that I can bring honor to his name. Lord, even when your path takes me through the valley of the deepest darkness, fear will never conquer me, for you already have. You remain close to me, and you lead me through it all the way, not part way, not just at the beginning, all the way. Your authority is my strength and my peace. The comfort of your love takes away my fear. I'll never be lonely, for you are near. I love this line. You become my delicious feast. Even when my enemies dare to fight, you anoint me with the fragrance of your Holy Spirit. You give me all I can drink of you until my heart overflows. Here's the crux of it right here, these last few lines. So why would I fear the future? For your goodness and love pursue me all the days of my life. Then afterward, and here's the hinge point to this whole thing. Then afterward, when my life is through, when I breathe my last, when my heart beats its final beat, I'll return to your glorious presence to be forever with you. On May 4th, 2017, I had an extraordinary privilege. And it was the privilege of holding my dad's hand as he passed away. It was by far the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, but it was also the most beautiful experience I've ever had. It was hard because my dad was no longer with us. He was gone. Physically, he was gone. So there'd be no more laughing or joking with him like we often did over a coffee or a barbecue or a lunch. I wouldn't be able to ask him a question or seek his advice as I faced a decision I had to make. I wouldn't be able to fight over the chicken or turkey bones that were left over after a meal because we both love to just pick them down to the bone. I wouldn't be able to learn from him as he fixed cars, ask him questions. There wouldn't be any of that anymore. But holding my dad's hand was the most beautiful experience, and here's why. Because as he lay there facing death, it was right there. He had a look on his face, and it was the look of complete, total peace. It was the look that echoed the words of David. It was like he was saying to me, son, why would I fear the future? For God's goodness and love has pursued me all the days of my life. Now, when my life is through, I'm going to return to his glorious presence to be with him forever. That moment at his deathbed that we shared did so much to anchor my faith in ways that I didn't even think possible. And the truth is, it could have done the exact opposite. It could have undermined it. Because God didn't save my dad. And therefore, he doesn't care. But in that moment, there was, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I knew that God was good. That he was in control. And that he not only cared for me, but he cared for my dad. And he can be trusted. Trusted to be with me not only in this life, but the next. And when we live in that place, worry loses all its power. Because so what's the worst thing that's going to happen? That brought me so much peace. And the truth is, the same can be true for you. You know, if there was ever a formula that I could give you out of the Bible, overcoming worry, it's, some instructions that you and I can actually practice and put into practice and use to help defeat worry. They're found in some words written by a guy named Paul, who was able to find peace when he had plenty to worry about. He wrote these words while he was in prison. And the future didn't look very good. And yet he writes this: don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. So what he's saying is, all those things you're worrying about, turn them into a prayer. God, I'm really worried about this. Help me with this. I'm not sure what's going to happen with this. Would you be with me through that? Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. Have you ever met somebody like that? They're going through something like super traumatic, yet they just like steady. And you're like, what is going on? Like, how? That's the peace Paul's talking about. His peace, God's peace, will guard your hearts and your minds as you live in Christ Jesus. So let me leave you with this. What would it look like for you to begin to trust God? Perhaps in a new way or for the first time ever. And believe that he does care for you. And that he is there with you. That he is willing to provide you with whatever you need to make it through whatever it is you're facing. What would it look like for you to take a moment, maybe as I close in prayer or after the service, to go to Theater 5, where we've got an awesome team of people that are just would love to sit down and talk with you. Or you can go in there by yourself, whatever works best, but just to find some time where you can just say, God, this is what I'm worried about. Because he can be trusted. He is there. And he will give you that peace that you are so desperately searching for. I'm really glad you're here. And please, if you are worried, just take it to God. I invite you to pray with me. It's true, God, that we all have things in life that we're concerned about and worried about. And worry in and of itself isn't wrong. It can be healthy. It's when it becomes all-consuming, it doesn't do us any good. It keeps us up at night. We lose our appetites. We get grumpy and short with people that we love. But you promise a better way. You can bring us that peace that we're so desperately searching for, where we can just quiet our minds, quiet our hearts, quiet our souls in the midst of whatever it is we're facing. And so my prayer for all of us, myself included, is that when we feel those worry monsters starting to grow, the narrative starting to play out in our mind of worst case scenarios, that we would be reminded that we don't have to worry about anything. And you will give us the peace that transcends anything that we can even believe to be possible. Thank you for loving us and providing this for us. And we pray this in your awesome name. Amen.